Ah.
It's actually a pretty good dev program. If his drops, we can upload it later. Okay.
Yeah, I know. Ah.
If his drops, we can upload it later. Okay.
Yeah, I know.
Here. Okay. So once again, I'm going to start with a little bit of housekeeping. Please stay off the stage during the lecture and don't use this microphone as it'll amplify your voice. If you guys have private conversations, we have sound isolation corners in the back right and left corner. All right. So please take personal conversations back there. Thank you very much. Now, we are live. We are on YouTube now. Reintroducing ourselves for all the people who just started watching us through the stream. Hi, this is DGen-Tech. We are a group of working professional FERs in the STEM fields. That's science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and medical. And of course, like all the techie FERs, we meet on virtual reality, as all the techie people should meet. Now, this is our monthly meetup where we meet and greet with some of the techiest folk you're ever going to meet on virtual reality. And we have our lecture portion, which is starting right now. Now, a little bit of a background here. We have our first guest lecturer here for DGen-Tech, Edwin-at-work. Now, Edwin, I reached out prior to MFF, met them in person. At first, I was just kind of fanboying a little bit, but after having a conversation with them, they were more than eager to give us a lecture. Edwin-at-work is an IO psychologist, and they give these presentations professionally. And I will let him take over and introduce himself. And thank you so much, by the way. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Hello. All right. So let me get that over there. Y'all can hear me, right?
Yes.
All
Yes.
Right. Yeah. So, first of all, hello, persons and fursons. My name is Edwin. I'm Edwin-at-work. I am, as mentioned, an industrial organizational psychologist, which means that I went to school for way too long to learn how to measure psychological things like people's knowledge and skills. So it's a psychologist that works in a in a business setting. So some folks will focus on organizational structure, stress in the workplace, occupational health stuff, or you're more on the industrial side.
Right.
I build certification and licensure exams for many different organizations, everything from cosmetic dentists to different banking certifications, organ transplant folks, menopause counselors. But by night, I work within the furry fandom to do job coaching. And yeah, now before I go on, I have to admit, this is the first time I've ever been in virtual reality. So that's an absolute lie, because I have been here a few times to prep for this. So, I can't even see what this screen says right now. I run a Linux OS, and it's not streaming well. So if things go wrong, please shout. Let me know what's going on. I know my avatar is just at a locked position. That's because I can't do the webcam because of the Linux. Because of the Linux issue. What's that?
Mine has the PowerPoint.
Fine, I'll just look at it. Just see from YouTube.
OBS.
I'm going to keep going. But yeah, so please be kind as I'm going through all of this. So what are we going to be talking about here? We're going to be talking about. I'm going to go through first some disclaimers. I'm going to go through some of the very kind of basics to set the scene. I know this is a mixed group. There are some folks who are current professionals, maybe folks who are in between, and I know that there are some that are bright and shining faces getting ready to graduate from school very soon. So I'm going to be trying to cover kind of all that ground. So that'll be basics. We'll talk about the job searching process. Ways of it's difficult to be successful. I'm going to save you time right now, but there are ways that you can be more quick and efficient with your job searching. Spend a little bit of time talking about resumes, how some other ways that you can prepare to do an interview, and then so this is like about 30, 40 minutes, but I want the lion's share of this presentation to be a Q&A so I can hear from you and we can respond to the real living, breathing questions that are out there in today's audience. So without further ado, let's start with some disclaimers. First of all, I must say, although I am in industrial organizational psychology, I have a PhD, and I am a job coach, I am not your job coach. Tonight's feedback is intended to be general in nature. So another way to say it is if you decide to do something silly and somebody asks me, like a judge, about some of the silly things that you decided to do, I am more than happy to tell them that you decided to take job advice from an anthropomorphic hare. And that may not go as well in a courtroom. Second thing, and I've always slipped on this a few times, but although I have a PhD in industrial organizational psychology, I am not a psychologist. And that's because I am not licensed. Okay, so if I slip up and I refer to myself as a psychologist, just know that that's a non-funny joke. It's not for realsies. I am not a psychologist. The third thing is my practice is entirely in the United States. I think good portions of tonight's chatter, especially with the Q&As, will be helpful and broadly applicable to most places in the world, but my jam is in the U.S., so there might be times where we start talking about U.S. employment law, kind of trends within different industries within the United States. Okay, next, let's talk about the base. So there's so many different jobs out there. What's the basic type of job that we're going to be kind of looking towards for tonight's presentation? And that's going to be, I'm going to assume it's kind of a first job, a entry-level job. This is going to be a first job that's out of school, so like a college graduate, at least a BA. I've heard there's some folks pursuing more graduate school education. And then this is going to be your standard office job. Now, why do we need to set a base? Because there's so many different ways of going through a hiring system depending on the type of job or industry it is. So like in fast food, I'm sure you've driven down the street and have seen interview day where you walk in, give them your resume, you talk to somebody, and 2 weeks later, you're working on the line. That can happen. That's not a typical hiring system. How about folks that are involved in being in a dance company or being a ballerina? You're probably not going to do a resume or an interview. You're going to do a recital. And what that recital looks like is pretty different than if you're going to be, chemical engineer or something like that. And lastly, like down here, we got a firefighter. So most firefighters, they don't apply to become a firefighter. They have to apply to seek entry into the firefighting academy. After going through academy, then they can apply to the job. So this is just an example of like the many different ways that hiring systems can be set up, and why we're going to start with a boring office job, because those are pretty common across the board, and a great launching off point when discussing how it works in different industries. All right, so let's go with basics. By the way, I know if I was at a con right now, I tell people to take out their phones, open up an email, and write it to themselves so they could make notes. I don't know what capabilities you have, but if you could somehow make notes, you may hear some interesting stuff over the course of this presentation, so you can jot down and keep for a later date. But anyways, so let's go over some of the basics. Again, that is true, it is recorded. Again, I'm starting with like kind of very broad feedback, and then we can zero in and get way more specific once we get to the Q&A portion. But let's look at some of the basic stuff first. So first of all, in your standard hiring process, there are 5 steps that happen, and they are, in order, resume review, followed by a recruiter call, followed by a technical or skills interview, followed by a culture or team fit, and then finishing off with an offer letter. Now, this is like the standard layout. Many of you, especially in some of the harder sciences, you're going to have multiple rounds of technical and skills interviews. But this is, when you're applying to a job, this is what you should be expecting and what you need to be preparing for at each one of these steps. So that's the 5 steps in a hiring system. Next, how hiring systems work is what it does, the whole purpose of it, is to align people in some type of rank order. So let's say here we have some animals that have applied to a job. I'm going to call it a jaguar, camel, a dog, and a deer. So after this hiring system goes through from beginning to end, what it'll do is it'll put people in an order. So in this case, I did it by size. We have a camel, we have a deer, followed by the jaguar and the dog. What can be misleading and especially nerve-wracking for folks who are applying to work is they say, well, wait a minute, whoa. What about the big animals out there in the world? Aren't there elephants? What about whales? What about mythical dragons? Where are they? Why aren't they considered? They're not, because they didn't apply to the job. The person who gets the interview, the people who move forward, are the best in the rank order. So you don't have to be perfect when you're applying to a job. You just have to be in the pool and considered. This is why it's a good idea to look at job postings on a somewhat frequent basis, because sometimes you have companies that are drowning and they need a butt in a chair right now. And so they're going to open up the resume review process for 2 weeks. And when they're done, it's closed. And they're going to take whatever they've got. And then it's going to be this rank order system. So keep in mind, it's about rank ordering people. It's usually not an absolute criteria. You need to be this level of competence to make the job. Usually not the case. Next, feedback. It's a song as old as rhyme, story old as time. You barely hear anything when it comes to feedback from companies when you're applying to work. If you remember our 5 steps from earlier, the further you get down in the steps is the more likely you are to hear feedback. So if you made it to a final round interview, you're probably going to hear that you didn't get the job. If you're here at the top at the resume review, it's generous to say it's a 50-50 that you're going to hear anything. But essentially, if you're tracking your resumes, if you don't hear anything after a month or 2, just cross it off the list and continue living your life. But Edwin, I made it all the way down here to a final round interview. They told me they were going to ask me, or they were going to come back to me in a week, but they haven't gotten back to me. What's up? What's going on? That typically means that you weren't the first pick. They've offered the job to the first pick, and they're waiting for them to accept. If they don't accept, then they'll come to you as the second pick. So it's advantageous for them to leave you in the cold and not tell you anything. If you try to contact them, they're probably not going to talk to you about it. All these terrible games that go on in a hiring setup and situation. But don't expect feedback, unfortunately. All right, next, let's go on to job searching. If you have played Dark Souls, you're probably familiar with the idea of the Hollow. These are folks who used to have a degree of humanity with them, have lost it, have forgotten their name, and now shamble around some castle. This is the step within the hiring process where people become hollow. It's very important to take on this step strategically, to think about it, not necessarily how hard could you work, but, how am I going to be successful? What I would say is consider how you can be quick and efficient with how you go about your job searching, because this is like Sisyphus pushing the stone up the hill. It can go on and on and on. So be quick and efficient. So here are some ideas of just how to do so. So first of all, believe it or not, every state in the United States and some of the territories have state-sponsored job boards. You can either type in this big dumb URL, or in your search engine of choice, you can put state job board and look for whatever's offered by the Career One Stop. It'll give you a long link page of all 50 states. Why would you look at the state job board? One is most people have forgotten about it. Everyone saunters off to Indeed or LinkedIn, whatever have you. So there is a state job board. The second thing is many companies are compelled to post their job on the state job board. So you may have heard of affirmative action. Yes, I know the current executive administration, which we're not going to discuss a lot. I know it's a hot topic, but the current executive administration has defanged much of affirmative action, but They still have to file affirmative action plans, and part of affirmative action is that you have to post your jobs on the state-sponsored job board from where the job is going to be hosted. So that's why when you go on the state job board, you will find jobs for CFOs for companies. I mean, go ahead and try to apply to that job. You ain't going to get it, and it's only there because they have to post it there. So it's not a perfect place to look for jobs, but it's a well that folks overlook. And also, it's typically pretty clean. You see in LinkedIn or Monster these kind of cycles of filth that go on from week to week to week of the same jobs being posted over and over again. You don't see that as much on the state job board. So don't forget about your state job boards. All right, that's one. Next is Boolean search terms. My mother was a librarian. And the way that you find a book in a library is to go up to a computer. This is post, Dewey Decimal System and the index card thing. But you go up to a computer and you type in keywords. The computer system then looks for those keywords, attaches it to the book titles and themes, and blah, 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 blah. You find your book. So something that the library system was developed was Boolean search operators. Basically, a simple language of how you speak to search engines in a way to give it maximum amount of information so it can find what you're looking for. So let's say you really want to have a boring job and you want to be an office clerk. If you type office clerk into Indeed, you're going to be overrun by a tidal wave of blood and nightmares because there's going to be millions of jobs that are going to pop out on the other end. And then you, with your meatball eyes and sausage fingers, are going to slam on your keyboard and spend way too many hours shifting through the filth, trying to find jobs that actually apply to you. Why it does this is when you type in office clerk, it is searching for both of those words within the job description. Can you imagine how many job descriptions have the word office and clerk in them? I mean, heck, most of them have office in it because of the cool surface text of how great it is to work at that company. That's a problem. So what can you do? So one very simple example is you can put it in quotation marks, office space clerk. What you're telling the search engine is you are looking for the specific combination of OFFICE space CLERK. If the job description doesn't have that specific sequence of letters and spaces, don't return it. So that alone, if you're looking for a job that has a pretty clean job title, that will take out a lot of the garbage. Cool. What else can you do? Let's say, like in our example, you're looking for more of an entry-level job. Once you look for those jobs, if you type in office clerk and do all this stuff, you'll suddenly see things like, oh yeah, you need 5+ years of work experience, 8+ years of work experience, 10+ years of work experience, and on and on and on. So something you can do is choose something like this not operator here, and then start adding in phrases that you wanted to exclude. Not 5+ years, or, that's another operator, 8+ years, or 10+ years, 15+ years, as long as you want to go. When I apply to jobs, type in industrial organizational psychologist, and I get jobs for clinical psychology, school psychology, social work. I am not that thing. No, I don't have the training to do that kind of stuff. So I have to write a pretty long and complex search query using these operators so I can screen out all of the social work, school psychology jobs. And why do you do that? Again, it's to make this process as clean and efficient as possible. Because the more garbage that you need to go through manually and slowly, feebly on the other end of the search engine, it's going to be more of your time that you could spend doing more valuable things. All right. What I would recommend is there's a few different ways of doing Boolean search operators. I'd recommend going to your search engine of choice and type in like Indeed Boolean search terms or LinkedIn Boolean search terms, and you'll find plenty of great guides. Once you have a guide, you've developed your search terms, write it down, save it on your computer, and after a while, it might be as simple as a cut and paste every other day, twice a week, however you want to set up your schedule for applying to work. That alone can speed up the job searching process. All right, two others. Number 3, there at the top, is apply directly. So what a lot of companies do is they will outsource their recruiting to some third-party recruiter vendor. So that means someone who is not, someone who is not the job provider is going to be posting on LinkedIn, posting on Indeed. You're going to be sending your resume to them if you send your resume through Indeed, and then you are putting your hope that they will then dutifully send your resume to the folks who are actually going to offer the job. So what is a good practice, this takes a little bit of time though, but is to use one of the job boards to identify where there is jobs and then go on to the company's career page and apply to the company directly. There's a few benefits to doing this. One is, as I hinted earlier, you know that your resume is going into the hands of the company that's offering the job, and that is important. Other benefits are you can create an account with the company. Most ATSs are applicant tracking systems. And usually somewhere in that system, it gives some feedback. Maybe if your application's being considered, if your application's been rejected, or whatever. Some people get, it provides some feedback and some closure for them if they get that little bit of a status update. So that can be handy. Another good reason to apply directly is you actually get to see if the job exists. Because usually companies do not post phantom jobs on their website, but recruiting firms can and may. So if you see it on a company's website, it's much more likely to be a true post. We can talk about phantom posts later on once we get to Q&A. But anyways, apply directly to the company. The fourth one I want to talk about is what I call the robo resume. So when you apply to a job, usually the first thing that pops up is an upload button. You click the upload button, you feed your resume into that, and then it butchers it to all get out. It puts it into its electronic system, and you look at this mess, and you spend anywhere from 30 to maybe an hour fixing up the monstrosity, the spaghetti nightmare that it has created. So for example, what I have on the screen, this is a mock-up of my own personal resume. For human eyes, this is all right. You know, we could talk about like, ooh, look, there's some skills over here who are highlighted. Wow, a narration. Oh, wonderful. So this works well for human eyes. But if you give this to an applicant tracking system to scan, my God, it's going to be utter failure. So what can we do? The idea, this is a bit of a complex slide, but I'll go through it step by step, is you build a secondary resume that is sole purpose, is for the applicant tracking system to read easily. This is how you do it. You make a text document. So already we're leaving a PDF, which these systems do awful in reading. We're not doing a Word. We're not doing all these other things. We're doing a text document. Very straightforward for a system to scan that thing. And the mode of it is in this kind of cadence of very clearly defined labels followed by the information that connects to that label. So what's your first name? What's your last name? Your address, state, city, zip code, your phone, your email address. Normally, and I'll go here, that is on your resume. It's on the upper right-hand corner. Who knows if that applicant tracking system is going to put it in the right spot? So you're trying to force feed that applicant tracking system a format that it's going to be able to use. So here's an example of work experience here in the middle. So job title, organization, that's the name of the company you worked for. Where was it located? When did you begin working? When did you end working? How many hours a week was it? That's important if you work part-time or contract. And then some job description. When you're filling out the job description, just have it be a paragraph, just sentences. For this level, once it's done uploading your resume, then go into the electronic resume that it just created, then put in all the returns, then make it look fancy. But get it in correctly first, and then make it pretty. Over here at the end, you have some examples of education. So put your school, your degree, your field of study if that's important. Some people specialize. GPA, some jobs will ask for GPA, others don't. And then when did you begin your program and when did you end your program? At a minimum, you have to say when you graduated. So this will make the upload system go from anywhere from like, I don't know, I'd say 40 or 45% of a success rate to maybe something more like 85 or 90. I'm not saying this is perfect. Play around with it, tinker around with it, but it's a good starting point. At a minimum, here, it's much easier to cut and paste from a text document than a Word document, especially a PDF document. So there's benefits in doing that. So this is a robo resume, a way of speeding up the job application process. This is the difference from applying to, say, 2 or 3 jobs in an afternoon to like 8 or 9 jobs. If you're in a high volume, I'm going to be applying to all sorts of jobs, this is the way to do it. Like, hey, I'm looking to work just retail. I've landed into a city. I just need to make money for the next season. Then this will very much speed up that job application process. Okay, robo resume. Moving on, let's talk about the resume itself. What a wonderful transition point. So a way of thinking about it and thinking about strategically is we have our 5 steps that we talked about earlier. Resume review, recruiter call, technical skills interview, culture, and offer letter. If you think about it, you have different amounts of people or persons going through each one of these steps. So in your resume review, you have like a train load of people who are slamming through that resume review process. But after that, we get down to a bus load of people in that recruiter call stage. After that, for technical interviews, we're down to like a van, so a handful of people. Culture team fit, maybe, oh boy, if they still do this, if they fly people in, they want to meet them face to face. That's your culture or team fit interview. That's taxi worth of people because you're sharing a taxi. And then at the end, on their lonesome, a bicycle for one. So if you think about it, you're building a resume that's going to help you go through all of these steps. The most cuts happen in the resume review stage. When you're going through these steps, you have to think about the audience. Who are you writing, and eventually, who are you going to speak to? You have 2 different main audience members. The ones at the latter end, these bottom parts, is what I'll call a hiring manager. Hiring managers are pretty cool because, one, they have the final authority, or they can put in the paperwork for whoever's going to rubber stamp it. So a person receives a job. That's who you're trying to impress. Also, they either manage, oversee, and or have done the work that they are hiring for. So that's the person where you could go full nerd out and start talking about the technical details of what you know how to do. That's the hiring manager. But what about these earlier stages, what we have up there? That's typically conducted by either a recruiter or someone who is internal to HR within the organization. These people's jobs are to hire people. They don't know anything about this job that they're hiring for. They may even be hiring for multiple jobs. If you start throwing technical details at these people, they are going to get lost and confused. So now you have a choice. You have a decision to make. When you're building your resume, who is your audience members? Is it going to be that recruiter and that HR rep there at the top, the earlier stages of the process, or is it going to be that hiring manager towards the bottom? Think strategically, but broadly, I would suggest you write your resume for the upper bound folks, that recruiter. Why? Because if a hiring manager gets your resume and they think it's garbage, they're not going to reject you. Why? Because they're seeing your resume because they already have an interview scheduled with you. If they see something wrong with your resume, they will ask about it in the interview. And at that point, you've made it. You're talking to a real person. But the recruiter is going to try to read through your technical jargon, your nonsense, try to interpret if it's what they're looking for, and then they're going to make that train load into a bus load of people. So that's who you have to talk to. setting the stage for the resumes. Here's our recruiter. First of all, like I just mentioned, they are not familiar with the job. So they're going to be leaning heavily on that job description to try to figure out what's going on. Now, I'll do one asterisk here. I know some of you, your wheels are already turning. What about AI? How does AI play into this role? Let's wait till later on in this presentation for comments about AI, okay? But right now, I'm treating this as like more traditional resume review process. So they don't know much about the job. They're going to lean heavily on the job description, and hopefully it'd be great if they got to speak to the hiring manager to get a deeper sense as to what's involved in the work, what they're looking for. They also have huge stacks of applications that they're going to be going through. So, and they may be hiring for multiple jobs, not just the one that you're applying to. So they could be in a big time bind. So you have somebody who's not really familiar with the job, who is reviewing too many pieces of paper, and they don't have a lot of time. My God, what can we do about it? So, so the asterisk is about AI. We'll get to that in a little bit. First of all, some very big basics. In the United States, this is one of those US-centric things. Resume, no more than 2 pages. Front and back of a sheet of paper. If you start drifting onto page 3, assume that they're not going to read it. You need to keep in mind that folks in the United States speak English. When we read a document, we start in the upper left-hand corner of a document, and then we read left to right, going to the bottom right-hand corner. That means anything in the upper left-hand corner of that page is primary real estate. That's where the person's going to start reading. The bottom right-hand corner, they may not even get to it. So if you want to highlight something, if you have notable skills and experiences, try to make it towards the upper left part of the page, because there's a chance that they will get to it. 2 pages. Next, this is it seems small, but it's a big deal, is when you are putting in your job experience, you must put down the month and the year that you started a job opportunity and ended a job opportunity. You can't see my hands right now because my camera's not working, but HR professionals will count on their fingers looking at your resume, trying to count how many years of experience you have, because in every job description, they say have 3+ years or whatever. So you have to give them the months. If they have to guess, that makes it much more likely that they will put your resume away because they don't know how to count for your years of experience, especially if you've worked multiple jobs, layered jobs, seasonal work, all within the same year. You have to include the months. All right. Another idea is to do a summary. So here's an example of a resume. This is your traditional resume. I call it the hero's journey. You know, at the beginning, I did all of this stuff. And then incrementally, step by step, I progressed. I became much stronger in my career until now, here I am applying to your job. It's the hero's journey, which is the traditional resume layout. So here we have someone who works IT help desk, and they've level 2 IT technician, computer repair, blah, 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 blah. But here's the problem. Again, think of the audience. Think of the recruiter. What happens if one of the things that they're looking for is like, oh, this individual has knowledge of working with Dell, Lenovo, MSI, and Apple products? You have to make it all the way through the first job entry into the second one to find that bullet point. Do they make it that far? Is their reading comprehension strong enough to get to that point? Can they remember everything in the wall of text? Difficult questions. So a good idea or a good practice can be to do something like this. You add a summary statement. So maybe your resume is pretty static from one job to another that you apply to, and there's a lot of in-depth strategy we could talk about with resumes. But if you're going to spend one thing to customize, add 2 or 3 sentences at the top of your resume and tailor those 2 or 3 sentences to the things that you believe they're most looking for. So in this case, in my example, was Apple, Dell, Lenovo, and other computer systems. So bam, you're giving it to them right off the bat. There's some research to suggest that individuals will build a first impression of your resume within the first 30 seconds of reading it. I'll tell you it's even less than that. It's probably more like 5 seconds. That can involve just reading your name, but that's a whole rabbit hole I could go down. I did my whole PhD dissertation in resume review and the impact of a name on callback rates for people applying to work. And it's disheartening, is the short story of it. All right. Let's talk then about the interview process. First of all, congratulations if you've made it to this stage, especially these days of this economy. But what can you do in this interview? What are some kind of basic tips? Because there's many different things to prepare for. So the first thing is, we've been here a lot, but to keep in mind in the 5 steps, you have different types of interviews, and every interview goes about it in a bit of a different way. So in your recruiter telephone call, you're going to get the recruiter who's going to call you, who's going to ask you 2 sets of questions. The first set of questions is going to be things that are pretty stock, scripted, particulars for the job. And they're looking for simple yes or no answers. If they want you to extrapolate, go ahead, talk it out, but also keep in mind that these are super novices. If you get into technical details, they will get lost. So consider your audience when you're making your responses. The second part of questions they're going to ask are standard HR questions. Like, are you a U.S. citizen? Will you require sponsorship? Are you a veteran of a foreign war? All that kind of stuff. Everybody will follow that script. Just know that those questions are coming. Technicals and skills-based interviews, those are all over the place. And I'm sure everybody in this room who has working experience has war stories about interesting and odd things that have gone on in technical interviews. Just know that's at that point, you're talking to a hiring manager. At that point, you're looking to impress. And at that point is the most varied in what it's going to look like. That's where it's handy to speak to others within industry to get a sense for what's common for what a skills-based interview looks like. And lastly, you have your culture and team fit. This is where it could be anywhere from round robins to a group of 5 people staring at you in a fishbowl. But that's where they get kind of the final feel or vibe about who you are and if you're going to work well in their team or in the company. So know the purpose of those interviews and know that they're coming at you. All right, next. Number 2, this is really straightforward, but it's extremely important. Think of your surroundings. Think of how you present yourself. A lot of video interviews these days, so make sure that from waist up is presentable. Maybe invest in a good camera. And also think about how things are blocked. So true story. I was at my company, I was helping out with hiring a new psychometrician. It's a fancy term that they call us. And candidate was obviously seated at their kitchen table, sliding glass door behind them with the setting sun. So for 45 minutes, we were staring into the sun, talking to this candidate. And it was dramatic. It was kind of like, you know, noir film shadowing. So that was kind of cool. But it physically hurt us after about 15 minutes. And so after the doors closed and we were talking about things, and I'll just say an aside, like, this candidate did not have the skills we needed. We all remembered him because he hurt us physically. So don't make that kind of mistake. Look at your surroundings, because those little things do matter when it comes to making an impression on an individual. The third one is practice, practice, practice. So when you do an interview, it's a very bizarre interaction if you think about it. It's very much like improv, like what's going to go on later on tonight. You are given a prompt. You have mere moments to consider how to respond to it, and then you have to give a thoughtful and engaging response on the spot. That is ridiculous, but that's what an interview is. The number one thing you can do is prepare to have that experience. I know even myself, I've been invited in to have interviews. I know the words that are coming out of my mouth. I know that the technical skills, the things I have to show, but I'm just rusty. And then it falls apart. And I walk out of that room saying, like, man, if I was just warmed up, that would have gone better. So whether it's talk to yourself in a mirror, talk to a friend, talk to an advisor or a mentor, but just try to break that rust off your body and be prepared for that bizarro, high-stakes impromptu situation. Sometimes it takes a few interviews to kind of get warmed up to how it works. Lastly, there are two questions that you can expect in any interview that you are part of. The first question, like if you haven't written anything down, this is the thing to write down. There at the top is the first question that you're always asked. Tell me about yourself. Then they stop and they turn and they stare at you. So be prepared to talk about yourself.
Do anything that's not furry.
So the thing to keep in mind is this is the first question that you are asked. This is going to set the vibe for what your interview is going to be like. So if you falter, if you balk at the first question, which is tell me about yourself, those interviewers are going to be like, this person can't even describe who they are. So know that it's coming and be prepared for how you respond. The last one, do you have any questions for me, is the last question that's typically asked in an interview. There's two ways you can respond to this. The first way you can respond to this is if you actually have any questions about the job. You know, what comes next? What's the time schedule? Hey, do you do this kind of work? Who's the lead of this team? That kind of stuff. They're asking that question because they want to be open and available for if you have any questions of them. The second way to respond to this question is to ask them an engaging question. So think about it like this. They've just spent multiple weeks talking to a handful of strangers from a script in a very one-sided conversation. They are asking the candidate questions, making little notes and thinking about folks. If you ask an engaging question, they suddenly switch to being on the defensive because they haven't been thinking too much. They've been watching, they've been doing their notes, but they haven't been engaged in what is going on in the conversation as an individual. So if you ask them a question like, I see, you have been working at this company for a while. In your eyes, how has it changed from when you first started to where it is now? So it's a very basic, straightforward question, but suddenly they have to stop. Oh no. What was it like when I first got started? What is it like now? I have to say the good words so I look good in front of other people in this group interview. And now suddenly they are engaged in the conversation. So later on, a week, 2 weeks later, when they have all the interviewees kind of on a table and they're going over resumes again, you're going to stick out because you were memorable, because you engaged them in a conversation. So think of it. My interviews are typically a little more silly. So I would ask a question, hey, in 5th grade, when you wrote your book report about what you wanted to be when you grew up, is this what you thought you'd be doing? Everyone says no. Nobody thinks they're going to do the thing that they do, unless it's like a firefighter or something like that. But that's a way, again, they have to stop, think about what they wanted to do when they were a kid, maybe give a little chuckle, and then talk about how they got there. So it's a way to engage individuals. Only ask an engaging question if you have the time. If they've run out of time, if you're going over, don't be like, oh, wait, I need 10 more minutes to ask you an engaging question. Don't do it. Don't do it. People will remember if you help them up. But consider it an engaging question. So these two questions are always going to happen in an interview. And of course, like the previous slide shows, practice, practice, practice. You know these questions are coming. Practice what you're going to say. Practice how you're going to deliver it. All right. Oh, boy. So that kind of does it for the basics. So we already went through all these bits. Let me very quickly interview a little or talk a little bit about me. Hello, I am Edwin-at-work. You may have seen me on Fur Affinity. I advertise on there. Reddit, Blue Sky, the social media platform that will not be spoken of any longer. I was on there for a while. I post weekly job tips every Friday, so be looking out for those. I'm on to 108 right now. So if you go on my Fur Affinity, you will find a gallery of 108 different job posts or job tips, some of which might be handy, some of which may not be relevant to your job search. I do a weekly Edwin sketch a week where I have a different artist produce a different picture of Edwin. I'm entering my 4th season now, so over 150 pictures from 150 artists. So some of them are realistic, some of them are a little more, 70s, and some of them are the swimsuit edition. Hello there, Edwin in the middle. So that's every Tuesday. I post a different picture of Edwin. Yeah, swimsuit edition's in the middle of the summertime. It's a popular one. It's a popular one. Oh yeah, gasp. I also have a book, Work for Hire. This is a furry short story anthology. 15 different writers put together 23 stories that are a mixture of slice of life. Geez, there's cyberpunk, there's horror, there's light romance. There's all sorts of stuff in there. It was nominated for a Ursa Major Award, also for a Coyote Award, which is the Furry Writers Guild. So if you're ever looking for some casual reading and you want to, do some self-help at preparing for your job search, check out Work for Hire. You can find it on many platforms. Also, if you're in the U.S., you can find it on Hoopla. It just made it onto the public library system, so you can find that there. It's available in paperback and also ebook. I am also working on a visual novel right now called Robot Resources. It's a slice of life analog horror. I've been at it for about a year. It should be out soon. It kind of follows the animation style of a Tamagotchi. It'll be interesting. Look out for it. And believe it or not, I do one-on-one job coaching as well, where I meet with individuals, get to hear your story, look at your resume, go through kind of your background, and tailor an approach to how you can be successful, or at a minimum efficient, in your job searching process. That's all my socials. You can also type in your search engine of choice, Edwin-at-work links, and you'll see a whole bunch of nonsense. But that is my last slide. Okay, so that's the end of the formal presentation. Let me cough real quick. And I think now we're going to open it up to some open Q&A. Okay? So are you going to play Mic Runner?
Yes.
All right, thank you so much.
Okay. For the Q&A session, please, if you may line up in the middle here, and we'll hand it off the microphone to whoever's asking the question. For those who are on the stream, please ask your question in chat, and we will relay your question in just a moment.
So I can go. Okay.
This is always the most exciting part. Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah. Right. What I want to quickly ask about is some of your background research on how names affect that callback rate, and what you can do as a person if you have a name that is, less pronounceable to a group of Western recruiters.
Sure. So, if I were to summarize things as succinctly as possible, think of it as it's about stereotyping, okay? So in the United States, there's been gobs of research that occur when it comes to someone's assumed ethnicity or gender upon reading a person's name. If you are applying to a job that is in line with the stereotypes of that race or gender, then typically you see a higher callback rate. If you are outside of that stereotype, it impacts your callback rate. How do they research this? Researchers apply to jobs, and they submit the same resume, with the only difference is the name at the top of it. And then they record the rates in which people call them back for recruiter call or interview or whatever have you. And there are absolutely discernible differences in it. So to speak more pronouncedly, if you have a Hispanic or Black name in the United States, the stereotype is for lower level jobs, and that will impact you if you're searching for higher. And again, I'm speaking broadly across research, I'm not speaking for your industry, but just general academic findings. If you have a white sounding name or an Asian sounding name, that helps with the kind of white collar or upper level jobs. Interesting fact, Asian jobs have a positive effect both at the high level and low level. So congratulations if that's how you turned out on the genetics lottery. Gender works just the same. If it's traditionally male job, you'll see benefits. If it's traditional female job, you'll receive benefits depending on how your name is read. What can you do? If the company is worth their salt, they will blind the names on the resume so there's no stereotyping effect. Most companies are not worth their salt. So other things you can do is to try to reposition where your name is on the resume. Because where's your name? Upper near left-hand corner. It's the first thing that's read. The moment they read your name, the gears in the human mind begin to spin and the stereotypes are already being placed before they read a word of your knowledge and skills. So try to break that up. Last question, you didn't mention it, but it's name related, is those who are trans. Regardless of where you are within your journey, you have a terrible problem. What do you do about your name? What I will tell you is it is your choice when and how to disclose your name, but at a certain point, you must. Because at the end of the process, you will have to fill out an I-9 form where you have to put in your legal name. Now, if you changed your legal name to your chosen name, then you're A-okay. Everything's on board. You know, it's everything's paperwork. If not, you have to be prepared to have that conversation with folks. It's an unfortunate truth of our society. I think it has gotten better in some ways, but we're still ass backwards, and there's space to go.
Thanks. Very good answer.
All right.
Great question.
Next.
Good.
Yeah.
Hi. So I'm curious about the software industry. Before I ask my question, I want to know, like, do you have like a little bit of like a passing knowledge of software development jobs and what it's like out there?
Roughly, yes.
Okay. Friend of mine took like 7 months and 1,500 applications sent before he got the job he was looking for.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious. I'm also in software development and I'm looking for a job currently. Any advice? Any opinions?
So first, there's a few observations to state here. The first one I will say is broadly in tech and in software, there was what I will call the easy age for like the last 20 years, where if somebody had a piece of paper or they had demonstrable skill that they could do database administration, there would be a job for them to have. Not only that, it was probably a good paying job. At this point, it looks as though in quite a few places, we've reached saturation for many of those jobs. So this is not comforting to say, specifically to folks within software engineering and in other places in technology. It seems cataclysmic because it's not easy like it was, but now in a sense, you're in the thick of the shit like everyone else is when it comes to applying to jobs. I know that's not comforting. I get that, but like real talk. What I will say is, so we've hit a saturation point, and it's getting to be in a space where you're probably going to have to move and probably going to have to spend that investment to get to some of those places. So like there are hubs for doing different type of software development jobs, different areas in tech. You know, it's like a good example is notorious LA knows the LA zip codes. If you apply outside of LA and you don't have an LA zip code on your resume, they may not look at it, for example. Same with New York City. I haven't heard that for Seattle, but so another observation.
Remote,
Oh, sure.
What do you think about remote stuff? for
So remote is very
I assume that's
popular, and
worse.
everyone wants to do remote. So
Okay.
those jobs are out there. They're super competitive, and that's one where there's a tidal wave of blood and nightmares. Like, if you want to get a job, for example, at an Amazon or a Meta, and you put your resume into the applicant tracking system, they're probably not going to look at it because every day a new semi truck filled with software engineering jobs shows up and they dump the entire contents of that semi truck, and then maybe kind of sort of they go through it. So how they do much of their recruiting these days is either through headhunting for specific jobs, and that's usually for maybe mid but mostly upper level tech jobs, or through a referral system. So I got an interview at Meta, for example, and I got an interview at Meta because my friend works for Meta. They're a person analyst over at Meta. They would have never looked at my resume. No, would not. But my friend got it on top of the stack and skipped the whole resume review process. So that's where networking, and it's not necessarily like, hey, shake your hands, a family company, now you're an employee, but that's where recruiting or networking can help. Even just asking strangers like, hey, can you put me in just for within your internal referral system? So it's competitive. I'm going to stop there because there is more to say, but know that it's competitive. Be prepared for a difficult time, but everyone, to normalize it, everyone is feeling this terrible pain. And I think it is wonderful to be part of a group like this, because individuals in this room can give you perspective, and they may even give you not maybe a direct referral, but they can connect you to their network of individuals. And that's a way these days where I think people can move forward quickly.
Thank you.
Finger gun. All right. Who's next?
All right. Hello. Hi. So
Hiya.
this might be a little bit tricky of a question to answer. It has to do a little bit with, I think, your background. It looked like you had some background in adverse impact type studies and looking at that.
Yes, that's true.
And also the current regulatory environment right now for companies when it comes to things like DEI. And I was just wondering if you had any advice for people in here who are in the process of finding a job where they're interviewing related to self-disclosure, kind of from what you've seen from your end of things. What should people have? What should people keep in mind when it comes to self-disclosure?
You asked a goodie. So there's two parts to think about when it comes to an adverse impact or anything that relates to discrimination. And the first part is, what is the formal rule when it comes to how it operates? The second part is the more informal, which is it enforced? And this current executive administration has made it brutally clear that they're not interested in the enforcement of basically any type of regulation. And that's not just for hiring. We could go off to banking. We can go to different industries. They are not, even if law is in place, they're not bringing out the time and attention that's needed. That said, the federal government is but one layer of oversight that exists, because jobs exist in a state, and state has different laws and regulations and authorities to oversee it. Municipalities, if you're on indigenous people territories, then basically, okay. So just know, because things are a fuming black dumpster fire at the federal level, that doesn't mean that individuals aren't protected at the state level. Then it depends on your state. If you go to New Jersey, California, and New York, things are going to look different than if you're in an Alabama. Georgia is might surprise you in some ways. But what can you do about disclosure? The first thing I would say is do your research and look at what the company is doing. Usually, if they have some type of DEI statement, especially these days, that means something because they are doing something outside of the norm. I have heard horror stories, not just in companies, but in organizations that do certifications, that they've been contacted by the federal branch saying you should stop doing this. It's just like, what are the repercussions? What are they going to do? Man, we got to talk to our lawyers now. So it's wild times, but you have hum. It can be helpful to know your rights within the state. What I would say is you have to read the room and get a sense for how people will respond. Because even if a person is an ally performatively, there is still plenty of stereotyping that can occur behind the scenes in the unthinking mind that will impact the impression. And when they're stacking you up against 4 or 5 other people, those little cogs that spin can do something. It's not a heartening answer, but in short, I would say it's helpful to know your rights and what they should be doing. You can't see my hands, but there's air quotes. Consider the organization if they have a formal statement or if they have an understanding, and then look at the individuals who are talking to you. But beyond that, I don't have any more specifics.
Thank you so much. Sorry for the hard question.
I love them. I eat them for breakfast and lunch.
Hey, so you know that the whole disability statement that you sometimes see on job applications?
Yes.
Do recruiters actually see that?
So
or
yeah.
Sorry, go on.
So that so if you haven't applied to a job in a while, I'd say within the last, I think it was 2009, they introduced this, I'll call it a wacky sheet of paper. And I'll say it's a wacky sheet of paper because when you go through a job posting, and you're putting in your information, what's your gender? That looks different everywhere you go. Are you a veteran? That looks different everywhere you go. Then when you get to disability, all of the sheets look the same. They did that because the federal government came up with a sheet of paper and they told businesses, thou shalt use this sheet of paper with no modification. Why? Because in an affirmative action plan, there is a percentage that they put down in their recruitment goals that the individuals will have some ADA accommodation, American with Disabilities Act. So they will want some percentage of candidates to have a disability to meet their affirmative action plan. And to do that, they have to find some way of disclosure, which is that form that they created. Are you safe in putting information down on that form? You should be. And if not, that is the quickest path to a class action lawsuit that's imaginable because they are misusing a federal government form. So, like me personally, I would disclose ADA stuff. I would do that. I would feel confident in that. But I'm also the kind of guy where if you crossed me, I could be very articulate and painful in a hiring circumstance. Trust me, I'm a pleasure at company meetings when HR, shows off the new performance management system. Then Dr. Edwin has many, many questions about this performance management system. But anyways, so they have to have that. They have to have that form, and they should not be using it for anything more than putting it into a computer for when they file their affirmative action.
All right. Another thing I wanted to ask: how much will recruiters glaze themselves over the mention of AI in the resume?
Say your question again. You kind of cut out in and out there.
How much will recruiters sees themselves over the mention of AI in the resume.
Okay, so let's talk about AI right now. In the hiring context, it is a hot mess, super hot mess right now. As I mentioned earlier, we have an executive administration that's not interested in regulation at all. If you go to Silicon Valley, San Francisco, there are so many startups right now that are pumping out all sorts of homebrewed little AI systems, large language models to help out with the hiring process. The goal of which is not to preserve humanity, the goal of which is to reduce headcount. So you don't need to have so many HR professionals or recruiters reading through sheets of paper. That is the goal. Because of that, the honest answer is, who knows how AI is working right now in the hiring system? And that's because there are so many startups and little systems out there that are trying to get into the forefront of how it works. And there's so little regulation. The federal government, it's not going to come from the federal government. Will it come from our friends over in Europe? Maybe. That would be a sledgehammer if it came from Europe, and it's still working out over there. It's going to come through states or municipalities. New York is starting to work on some type of AI governance law. If New York comes out with something, and when I say governance, I mean for hiring practices. If New York comes out with something, if California comes out with something, Washington State, Oregon, others will follow suit. But they're all nervous looking for the language of how it should be worded. But for right now, it's chaos. There are some organizations that will hire for it. So some of your big, fancy tech companies, like word on the street is Meta has thrown out all of their hiring metrics and essentially looking for individuals who are AI natives. Doesn't matter if you can write a report worth a darn. That's what they're hiring on. So for some folks, there's an emphasis on it. For other folks, question mark.
So basically, yes.
It's probably okay these days. I mean, hell, even having AI part of the interview process. You know, so I have a friend that builds assessments for Amazon for their software. And there's a big question about, are you going to allow the use of AI during skills-based interviews? If you asked like a year and a half ago, it was a hard no. And there was a whole legal document about why they're not going to do it. These days, it's like, yeah, sure. So it changes constantly. And it will continue to change and evolve, especially once regulation comes on scene.
I see.
Yep. Thank you so much. I want to make sure we get the line here, but thank you so much.
First of all, thank you for the presentation. Very insightful.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome.
I want to dig a little bit more into some of the tips you had for resumes. So I feel like every person who's given me resume advice has told me I should lay my resume out differently. Some people say do it chronologically. I feel like that doesn't really work. Some people say do the summary at the top. Some people say like put your skills at the top. I guess what's your insight? Is there one way that's clearly better than the others? Does it depend on the job I'm applying for? I guess what's your take on that?
You're talking to a PhD person. I'm going to say it depends. Always it depends. But so if there's one, like if you're going to remember one piece of advice from tonight's program, speaking about hiring and selection and writing resumes, but I will also say like as general like life advice, spoken from someone with an IO psychology background, it's that people love stories. And people will look for stories in everything that they do in their life. And when they read your resume, if they start, I'm using the hero's journey, I spoke about earlier. If here are your humble beginnings and you move up the page and there's forks in the road, they're going to read that resume and say, that's not the hero's journey. This has nothing to do with from A to B. Why did we go to triangle? This doesn't make any sense. And the sad truth is that's okay. It's not required for it to make sense. But humans with their meaning-making machines love to build stories about things. So the layout of your resume should do the best that it can to tell the story of who you are. So maybe that means that your skills are at the top of the sheet. Maybe that means that some relevant experience is at the top of the sheet. Maybe, blah, 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 blah. I'm going back. Way back. Maybe you have like a multi-windowed kind of approach. And over here, you have all your technical nonsense. And over to the left, you have bullets so recruiters can find it much easier. It's why you receive so much feedback about your resume is because of all these steps, the resume is like the closest to art that you're going to get. And when you construct art, you have personal expression. So because you're talking to a lot of individuals, you're getting a lot of their personal a lot of their personal artwork in perspective. So that's a very long-winded, articulate way of saying it depends.
It depends.
Resumes are. I like that. Thank you.
But think about how do you tell your story. Think about it like that. All right.
Yeah, I always have trouble with that question about tell me something about yourself because I don't really have any projects I can show off that aren't related to furry. I don't really do much that isn't furry and basically inseparable from it. So if I can think of anything without just an awkward silence, I end up just going into some vaguely memorable tech support interaction from a previous job.
Okay. If you could you ask your question again?
Oh. But how? I'm not even sure how to word it as a question, besides I don't usually have a good answer for tell me something about yourself.
Okay.
Because I don't do much that isn't inseparable from furry.
Okay. So a good place to start when you're trying to build your story, again, it's to think about your audience. How can you learn things about your audience? Well, at a minimum, they posted a job description. If you look at that job description, it's going to lay out what they believe, at least on paper, is what's important. So what you can do is look at that job description, try to break it down, and think about what they are looking for. So usually, like when an IO psychology person like myself will analyze a job, we do something called job analysis. We will break apart a job into 4 parts. And those parts are knowledge, skills, abilities, and other. So knowledge are, you can open up a book, you can read that book, and congratulations, you've acquired that knowledge. Skills, you cannot open a book, you cannot read it and acquire a skill. Typically, it's something that's done through practice, repetition, experience. It can be a physical skill, it can also be a mental skill. You have abilities, which is a little gray, but abilities are like typically seen as innate. So if a person is agreeable, if they're extroverted, so personality is a great example of different abilities. Then you have other, and that's, well, things that didn't have any other spots. Quick fun fact. Notice how a lot of jobs say you need to be able to carry 50 pounds? Why do you need to carry 50 pounds? Why not 50 pounds?
Why do I need to carry 50 pounds if I'm sitting at a desk?
Yeah. So if you work in an office, usually that office has a printer. If your job, part of that job is to interact with the printer or perhaps load that printer, you're going to have to handle reams of paper. A box of a ream of paper is 50 pounds.
Oh.
So what they're telling you is you're in an office environment and you're going to be working with a copy machine. Even though that's ludicrous. Like you're going to be at a computer all day, typing away. Someone else is going to load the copy machine, but yet 50 pounds is on there. Anywho, so what I would say is look at the job description and think about what they're looking for. Then consider yourself in your own story and find ways to tie in what they're looking for into your story. And maybe that could be a starting place or a source of prompts when it comes to how you're going to respond to that question. And that's probably the best I can do without knowing more of your story and in a very public setting.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks.
Absolutely.
I'll go down. Okay, so this one's a little bit more of a distinctly biomedical question because biomedical engineering is a field that is kind of everywhere, but a lot of the companies that are doing it are big conglomerates, and so they have like subdivisions that do these things, but they don't send recruiters from these subdivisions to things like job fairs at universities or at similar such events. They send general recruiters who look for the overarching things that the company goes in for, but they don't necessarily always know that they even have a biomedical division. And so I guess my question is, do you have any tips for overcoming those recruiters so you can actually talk to somebody more knowledgeable like the hiring manager?
So in that circumstance, it's about jumping over hurdles. So this is where it's vital that you know your audience, so already you have great insight. You know that the Hanyak that they've sent down to for recruiting is someone who is not knowledgeable about the work. They still have some guidance. They are there for a reason, looking for certain things. You have to try to identify and distill what they are looking for. And that's the message that you share with that person. Once you get over that hump, then you can start talking to some more knowledgeable people. So like here's a great description, or here's a great example. So here on this resume, so again, this is a markup of my own resume. In my graduate school, I did a whole bunch of weird statistics stuff. So it's cut off here, but you see like multiple regression, analysis of variance and covariance. It goes into structural equation modeling, all the statistical stuff. But at the top there, that first bullet, it says descriptive statistics. Descriptive statistics is like average, median, mode, what's the biggest number, what's the smallest number. Very basic stuff. Why do I post that on my resume? Because once I was applying to jobs in the federal government, I got a call from the post office. The person said, your resume looks interesting, but we have to ask, do you have a background in descriptive statistics? All of this stuff means I can totally slay descriptive statistics, but they don't know what any of this means. They know on their sheet of paper it says descriptive statistics. So they asked Edwin, do you have descriptive statistics? At which point I replied, yes, I can do descriptive statistics. And then I didn't go any further. I don't work for the post office. But so that's where you have to craft your message. So if they're looking for descriptive statistics, tell them you know how to do descriptive statistics.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask because it's sometimes hard to pitch to somebody who's looking for a chemical engineer or a biologist that, no, you do indeed have a biomedical department. It's world famous for people who know about it. You need people. I've seen the job listings. Please give me an interview. I beg of you. So your advice, to clarify, is to kind of build a general kind of scientific, what they're generally looking for, what would be good fit for their company from a scientific perspective. They know they're looking for a scientist. Make them know that you're a scientist.
Yes. Speak to them as you would your aunt, who has no idea as to what you do, assuming that you have an aunt. I don't want to exclude anybody, but some ex-family member who has not enough competence to fully understand what you do. Try to break it down in a way that is digestible. The other probably harder truth is if on their sheet of paper, what they're looking for doesn't say your position, then there's nothing that you can do. Because that is extemporaneous, that's not core to why they're there. It's not going to go any further, unfortunately.
Thank you, and you gave a wonderful presentation.
Well, thank you so much.
That's 1 2 1 2. All right, there we go. Thank you so much for this presentation. I'm in a bit of a pickle here. I'm early enough in my career where I can segue into anything biology related. However, the powers that be think cancer research is fake and gay, which is half true, but I'm at that point where I can broaden my horizons into different sectors of biology. However, I guess for a professional like yourself, what would be advice for someone who is about 3 years early in their career, but they have to apply to different biology sectors in order to stay afloat?
Could you ask your question one more time?
So, what would be your advice for someone who is early career that is applying to a more broader scope of job?
Okay. So one piece of advice that you didn't ask for, but I'm going to give you, is at this stage, so like early career, you're not entry, you're early career, your next job is likely going to decide your fate for your general direction that you're going to go on. Because as you walk down the pathway of becoming a professional, that pathway becomes more and more narrow. A quick tangent, okay? So the baby boomers had a really cool opportunity. They came around in great number. They started industries. They started in a time of stick and spit, where there wasn't many tools, there wasn't much infrastructure, and they had to do a little bit of everything. Over the course of their working lives, those tools were developed, they specialized, and they did all sorts of big, wonderful things. But they saw these systems get built and developed, but they never forgot their roots in knowing how to do all of these broad, basic things, because they had to survive at the beginning. They are now retiring in droves. They are super generalists. They can do many, many different things. Companies are just now realizing it. They are realizing that their workforce is losing all of its skill. And so incoming generations, be it millennials, Gen Zers, all of them, they weren't there when things were created. They're trying to find a place in the workforce where they don't have a background that the baby boomers had and will never have, because we were not there when these systems were created. So all of that is to say that many people, when they start their jobs, they begin working in a small box, because a new person can't do everything. We're going to put you in a box so you become a master of that box. If you show competency and capability, you will leave that box and start journeying to closer adjacent boxes. And then maybe if you do real well, you'll move up and you'll leave the world of boxes into management and whatever have you. So the first piece of advice is where you go next is probably gonna, not 100%, because we live in a wacky world where there's infinite amount of possibilities, but it's probably going to decide where your career is going to go. So don't do it like lackadaisically. The other thing is, as you apply to all these different jobs, think of your audience. What are they looking for? Because each different position or sector within biology is going to be looking for a different skill mix. So you have to present and project that. Yeah, I'd say that's some quick feedback.
There we go. Thank you very much.
Sure, absolutely.
Thanks a lot for the talk. I have a bit of a broad question, and it is, should you be dedicating most of your time to quality or quantity of your applications?
Ooh. Well, here's what I would say. It is, so first, it's ultimately your choice and your strategy. It depends partially on opportunity. So if there's a lot of jobs available, then maybe it's a quantity kind of situation. You're just throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what's going to stick. Where if there's few job opportunities available, you may want to be much more discerning, much more exacting in how you put together your resume materials. So for example, if you're new to an area, man, you just want to, it's September, October, I just need a seasonal job so I can get rent, figure out this is the place I want to live, and then find my real person job. then I would say it's all about volume. It's all about, because you're just applying to big box stores. I'm being very American. Apologies for those who are international, but you're just applying to big box stores. Wherever will have you. So that's a volume situation. If, like some of the folks who spoke earlier, I'm just out of school, I have my software engineering degree, what do I do? You may have some top prospects where you're going to spend a little bit more time in developing that resume or your approach to how you're going to go about it. And it may also just oscillate as you go through this hiring, I'll call it a siege, because it might last a very, very long time. Because you may have the fortitude to sit down and churn out high quality resumes one after another. But then after 6, 7, 8 months, and your humanity is dripping out of your nose, you're becoming hollow. Maybe it's time to just, forget it. I'm going to hate my life if I sit down and do this any longer, or I could just slap and send out 5 or 6 resumes right now that aren't tailored. It's better that you had applied to those jobs than had done nothing and cried away your woes in a shower.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Hello, and thank you for the presentation. It was so fun
Absolutely.
to listen to you. So, a little bit of context for a simple question. There was a situation at my friend's organization. He approached women who hadn't recruiting because he was interested in finding new people for his department, basically. Not all, of course, but one of them rejected the resume of a man with 10 years of experience in system and technical infrastructure because the candidate didn't have a photo in their resume.
Okay.
My friend cursed her so much that he told that people review his resume and they just said the same way, basically. He was so angry at that. But this actually raised me a question, like, does having a real photo in your resume really make a difference in getting a job?
Okay, so this is very dependent on your location. In the U.S., it is a super no-go. Do not include a picture on your resume. Some recruiters or HR professionals will just gasp if they saw a picture on a resume. And that's because they're trained that that's the pathway to like legal liability and lawsuit. So they're going to gasp. If you go outside of the United States, it's much more common to include pictures. You're going to have to go with what's the norms of the culture. But I will say in the United States, that's the right call, not to include a picture. That's the right call. But the United States is but one country in a whole world filled with many different countries.
Interesting. I didn't know. I thought that just many respectable organizations do require that you will have a photo. You see real photos on LinkedIn profiles sometimes. So I thought that might be
that is true.
This really required or not?
That is true. It's definitely the norm for LinkedIn to have pictures. Say you're an artist, so you're going to have a portfolio, or you're in marketing. You may have your own website where you have a picture of yourself. Absolutely.
Yeah, I see. All right. Thank you. I got all the answers I wanted to know. Thank you so much.
Okay.
One more question. I noticed that there's a bunch of people, a bunch of folks here, as well as people watching. Some of which are in between jobs, and they're trying to, get that job and turning out several applications. It really hurts morale, and it hurts focus. What would be your advice for the folks still pointing their nose to the grindstone when it comes down to turning out those applications? How do we keep up morale?
What's going on?
I would say 2 things. One is this is a time. So this is important for general life, but in these deep dark moments, it's especially important to, identify and develop what your self-care regime is going to be. How do you comfort yourself at the end of that day? The simplest way to put it is, what is your go-to phrase that can help bring you out of that doom and gloom? What is your go-to activity that you can do to help break that cycle of having applied to a job? And then who's your go-to person or community that you can go to? So you are not alone in that deep and dark space. So personally, when I have a bad day or when I'm in the dark doom and gloom, the first thing I do is get a big cup of water. And I drink that big cup of water because I don't drink enough water. The second thing I do is I take off my shoes and I cut my toenails. I worked with a group of foot care nurses. One of the most enjoyable meetings I went to, halfway through it, they asked if they could see my feet. I was warned this was going to happen. And then there was about eight old women who were just crowded around my feet, pointing at it and pointing out like different characteristics about my feet, because that's their job, and they're really excited about feet. Not in the way that many people in the fandom are excited about feet, but like professionally excited about feet. But a key thing is we don't keep good care of our feet. We carry the weight of our woes in the world on our shoulders, which are then carried by our feet, and we don't trim our nails enough. And a lot of painful pressure can be released when you cut those nails. So that's some of my personal, what I do when I'm feeling stressed out. But that's the nose to the grindstone. So that's number one: is develop, record, and fortify your self-care routine. The second thing I would say is realize that when you're in the throes of doing the job searching and resumes and such, it's not good. And there's no magic phrase to make it a good thing. It is inherently an inhumane process that we have in place, unfortunately. So then the goal is, how can you be quick and efficient? How do you spend as little time as possible in the thick of the shit? And that's where developing good Boolean search terms to speed up that look-through process, a robo-resume so you're not just slamming your head against the keyboard trying to fix the applicants or the uploads, the resumes that you're uploading. It's saving in those little steps. When somebody tells me that they're going to go and apply to jobs all day, I laugh, because first, if you don't laugh, you cry. But secondly, I don't think anyone has the stamina to apply to jobs all day. It's you apply to jobs for 30 minutes, and then you go on Tumblr for an hour and a half, or watch YouTube Shorts, or whatever's your folly.
About the choice of recruitment, right?
So I would say, don't pretend to yourself, don't lie to yourself, don't say you're going to spend a whole day. Maybe, like, I'm not saying this is the right move for people in the room, but consider, do job searching 2 days a week. One day be LinkedIn, the other day be Indeed, and spend 2 or 3 hours doing a good job. See if you can find something when you cast your net. And then maybe the second half of the day is applying to that. But don't make it full days of applying to your work, because nobody has the stamina to do it, and you'll become hollow very quickly if you're in the thick of the shit for that long.
Thank you so much again. This was an excellent program. Here you go, Henny.
Yay!
Thank you.
Yes.
Figure it out.
Great talk. Do you have any? Speaking of like everyone loving stories,
For a little while.
do you have cool stories about like sort of skipping the queue that you didn't mention in your presentation? So like, how do we? Okay, so there's this, like, we've established very well that there's this big horrible machine that is kind of grinding through people, and then eventually sometimes people get hired.
Yes.
Do you have cool stories about how people have kind of leapfrogged that, or found some way, not through the machine, but around it?
Sure. This sounds hokey, but I have actually heard some success with this tip. Is everybody has a community or a network or a group that you have been part of, be it with a biological family, a found family, be it with an educational institution, with a great community like this one, or whatever. What I would say is it's very easy as time moves on is to lose connection with those communities. And when it comes to looking for work, that is when you need those connections the most. So a very simple thing, and I would highly recommend it, all of you that are about to graduate from school, highly recommend you do this, is reach out to your professors, your mentors, other students that you work with at your grade or those above or below, whatever. Ask for email addresses and start a newsletter, a yearly newsletter.
Okay.
That sounds so hokey and so boomer, but let me tell you something, okay? I was a psych student, unfortunately. I was looking down the barrel of a 4-year degree in psychology. You folks are trained with practical skills that can get you a job. 4 years at psychology, nothing. So I knew I was going to get into grad school eventually, but I wanted to work in the real world for a while. So what I decided to do was all of my notable professors that I worked in some research labs too, and blah, 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 blah. Once I left school, every year, around Martin Luther King Day, I would send out a yearly newsletter about what I was doing. Then, 4 or 5 years later, when it was time for me to apply to graduate school, I could reach out to those people and ask them for letters of recommendation. Because over those years, I'd sent them 2 pages every year. And so it wasn't like, oh, it's Edwin from what graduated class? What are you talking about? No, like they actually learned that I moved to Washington, worked for a nonprofit for a while, did this, did that, did some traveling or whatever. So it keeps those personal connections alive. And a newsletter is daunting, but like you can find templates for it. You find your way in how you want to craft your narrative, but it becomes this check-in point that you have with all these people that you have connected with at some point in your life. Because then, when it comes time to, in my case, it was looking for letters of recommendation for a graduate school program, but it could also be looking for a job. You have those connections in place. It's not a cold call. They know about what's been going on in your life to some degree. So it sounds odd and hokey, but that's something I would suggest is to start some type of annual way of connecting to people.
As a follow-up, does it matter if it's like a whatever, like hinny.net, or can it just be like LinkedIn updates or things like that? What did you do? How about?
So I make a 2-page PDF and I email it out every year is what I do. I think if you put it on a social media platform like LinkedIn, it just gets caught up in all of the churn and filth that happens on LinkedIn.
The algorithm.
And it's like, who cares? Whatever. Sorry if you're a fan of LinkedIn. And why are you a fan of LinkedIn? Who said but I think if you can make it a personal touch, that makes it more worthwhile. I mean, think about assuming that you go home for the holidays. If you don't, think of your most recent American rom-com movie. If you look at the refrigerator, you see that there's pictures of happy holidays, spooky Halloween, we just got married. Those stuff, though kitschy, really does matter. And it does, in probably as low bar as possible and as effectively as possible, maintain connections between individuals. And I'd say that's the goal when it comes to networking. It's the long play.
Cool. Seeing that there's nobody behind me, are we okay for time? Do you have any advice for folks who are sometimes involved in hiring to make it maybe less awful for a small fraction of the world? Like I've run a couple are not like personally like headed interview committees, but I've been on a few, and like it also sucks doing that, and it's really hard to avoid deadbeats and etc. So for anybody who might be watching who's like on the other end of this, maybe shout out to them?
Sure. So here's some feedback that I would give. First of all, is to keep in mind that everyone that you're connecting with is a human being, and it's very easy to turn people into objects, into resources, into a sheet of paper. And there are people's hopes and dreams. When you're involved in the hiring process, you are involved in many cases, especially in the US, one of the most important facets of that person's life, because social standing is connected to the type of job you have, and sometimes it's connected to the amount of money that you make. So it's a very serious endeavor. And it's also very easy to dehumanize people into resources that they are. In fact, it's incentivized in many organizations because of what you mentioned. There's that semi truck that pours out the resumes. My God, there's so much to do. What can we do to streamline this process? When you streamline the process, you dehumanize the process, and that hurts people who are going through the program. So keep that in mind, that you're hurting people. There's no way to get around it, but what can you do to lessen the harm that you're inflicting on people? The next thing I would say, and this is me speaking as someone with an industrial organizational psychology background, is the best way to be fair and impartial is to develop a script that's meaningful. I'm talking for interviews, and to follow the script in a meaningful way. Because here's the deal. We have inefficient little meat brains that are flopping around in our skull. And if you just went through 2 weeks speaking to a dozen candidates, you're not going to remember half of that nonsense. We could talk about the impact of maybe emotions or vibes and how that really kind of colors how a person's appraised. But if you ask the same set of questions to each candidate, and your note-taking system allows for a, hopefully, objective means of scoring their responses, you're going to be more fair than if you wing it. And it is so easy to wing it. It is so seductive. I have so many managers say, oh yeah, I know what I'm doing. You do not know what you're doing. I can point to 5 decades worth of research that shows you do not know what you're doing. And there is systematic bias due to probably biologically founded means of stereotyping and categorizing people that are at play with all of your casual, unscripted conversations. So be deliberate about it. Write a good set of interview questions. If you can, make a rubric and follow that rubric, because that's going to help you be as fair and impartial as you can be.
Last question. Can you talk about like red flags? Like, what are the employers that we want to run away from and never hear again, or never hear from again? Like, because there's that element of this too, right? Like, you land the job, everything's great, you get there, and then slowly you kind of like realize that you're in Silent Hill. Can happen. So, do you have any like a rules of thumb?
I mean, some people like Silent Hill. I believe there's a whole pizza eating character who loves wandering around in there, you know. But
my dream is to meet Pyramid Head. That's why I'm here interviewing today.
Yeah, I don't want to hear the interactions that you look forward to having with said Pyramid Head. But so it is a scale, is what I would say, because on one hand, there's the, like, what I have to do to preserve the quality of my life, which is you're going to be in a work environment. You're going to spend a lot of physical time in your work environment, but you're going to spend an even more amount of emotional time in your work environment. So then what are you looking for? What is important to you? And how are you going to rate those things as you're going through the hiring process? And if you have the luxury of saying yes or no at the other end of it. You do have to recognize, though, that you have the other side of the scale, which is that you have to do this to survive. And there are people that are walking into jobs every day because they must, because otherwise they are out on the street. These are people who walk into call centers. These are people who are walking into jobs that are known to abuse and grind people into dust. And that's how they're constructed to do those things. So I believe it's a personal question to think about what are red flags, and you have to weigh that in where you are in your circumstances, what's going to lead towards more long-term quality of life, and then what you need to do just to survive. But if you're talking about real stuff, one thing I would say is companies have different stages of life cycle. So one of the last stages is called decline, and that's where the ship is not going well, okay? It's either going to get sold or it's going to be knocked out of existence. I would avoid those companies. The good news is those companies, they don't hire people. They are laying people off in exorbitant amounts because they're trying to make that line go up because of to show profit for shareholders, for their private equity daddies, for their whatever, angel donors, whatever. Try not to join a sinking ship is the short of it, because that would be a short-term job. Though, if it gets sold off, you might get then entered into a company that could be quite beneficial. And so you could never apply to get into that company, but because you were acquired, that's a way to get through it. And no one here is in finance, right? Good, because if you're in finance, that's going to get axed in an acquisition. My God, finance, chunks of HR, you don't need those redundant systems when you're going from one organization to another. So if you're acting as a CPA, as somebody who's filing things from one sheet of paper into a drawer, you should be looking for a new job once you hear of the acquisition. If you're being acquired, if you're on the other side, if you're the victor, then yeah, you could stick around.
Thank you.
All righty.
So, due to various circumstances, I'm going to be in the probable job market of potentially looking at jobs outside of the United States, looking to hopefully move internationally. I was just wondering if there were any like tips you could give or like potential pitfalls to be aware of for a process like that.
I would say so. The first thing that's going to impact you is the big bold gate of what does it take for a company to allow for someone who is not native to work for that company. So, by the way, fun fact, we mentioned a little bit about, that there are certain protected classes, that there's certain ways you can discriminate. I will tell you universally, there are groups of people that are discriminated against across the globe. And the number one group is foreign workers discriminated against. And then sometimes it's actively encouraged. In the United States, it's actively encouraged. If you go to Cambodia, actively encouraged to discriminate against non-Cambodians taking employment. So keep that in mind. Though, I would say a handy thing to consider is certain companies give incentives for individuals who have skills to not only move to their, not only to allow for foreign workers to come in and work within their industry, but might even give incentives. So like last I saw, for example, New Zealand in some industries will allow individuals to come and work in industry, might even help with moving costs, definitely help with citizenship to move to New Zealand. I believe I just heard that Canada, up north, if you're in the world of academics, they just put down a fat $1 billion to support academics from the United States who may be displaced for I don't know what reason why, but are looking for a new home in academia to move up to Canada to get started in their lines of research up there. So look for those kind of offerings as well. For your larger systems and blocks, I would say you have probably great resources in this room. You should talk to someone in the EU if you're interested in going to work in the EU, because they have a whole thick, authoritative, spooky book that you need to know about if you're going to apply to work over there. But to summarize, the two things to keep in mind is that one, most countries will actively discriminate against foreign workers. And then number two, some companies are giving incentives for individuals to become to work within industry and perhaps acquire citizenship within their countries, depending on what their needs are and depending on the industry that you're in.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. All righty. So I don't know if I'm taking a script from you, but here's something I'm gonna say. So I'm gonna like hang out for a little bit. I know I appreciate the boldness and bravery of those who came and asked questions to a larger group. I will be sticking around, so if individuals have questions, absolutely, I'm here for a while so we can talk about things. Okay, and so with that, I will return the floor to. Go ahead.
Okay. I don't think we actually had, for whatever reason, we didn't have many questions on the YouTube channel or Discord, did we?
We got one.
Oh, there were a few. Do you have the stamina for that, or?
No,
because this is okay.
Let's do it.
Do it. Before we transition to that, I had a comment on DTE's last question. I have been looking for work in the European sector, and I've had better luck talking to people through VR than through recruiters and whatnot. So I think there's actually something worth to it. No, nothing snatched up yet, though. All right. What do we have from the YouTube or Discord? DTE, do you have those on screen?
Yep, I got it pulled up.
Thank you.
So, someone asked for clarification regarding the would posting to a private chat with former contacts also work in place of the email or newsletter?
Sure. So what I would say is, you have to find the medium that's going to speak to the audience that you want to speak to. So I mentioned a PDF newsletter mostly because I'm of what I would call the Oregon Trail generation, meaning that when I went to school, we had those ugly Macs that we ran the Oregon Trail on because that was the most sophisticated game we could play so that identifies me in the mid 80s, born in the mid 80s. So that's what's comfortable to me. But if you believe that your network, it will work better to speak through other means, then do it that way. A slick thing about an email address is it typically doesn't change. Where social media, people come and go from it, people transit, there's great migrations that go from one platform to another. It can be a little bit more unstable on some forms of social media. But yeah, so use the medium that speaks to whom you're trying to communicate to. But do remember that those old farts out there who would love to receive an email, or they'd love to put something on their refrigerator or whatever.
Perfect. Thank you. It doesn't look like there's any other online questions.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. That looks like that's it.
Ta-da! That's the end of the presentation.
Time to smash my controllers.
All right. So what happens next?
Thank you so much, Edwin. As Edwin said earlier, they'll be off to the side to take on any personal questions. They also have their contact information. Maybe you can put the slide up for your personal contact information. And to close out the stream, I've said this a few times, but for those who joined midway through, this is DGen Tech. We are a group of working furry professionals that in the STEM fields, that's science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and medical. And like any good techie furry group like this, we meet on virtual reality. Right now we're on VR chat, and we just had Edwin-at-work, an IO psychologist, to give us a whole talk about careers, jobs, resumes, and how to survive in the modern workspace in terms of finding work. So we have these on a monthly basis. We also have social meetups, so come hang out with us. We're on VR. We would love to hang out. So thank you so much, Edwin. Now, so I think that'll basically conclude the lecture and the formal portion of this meetup. We will be hanging out a little bit longer. In 1 hour, in 1 hour and 5 minutes, we will be going to the Comedy Engineers. You'll see me try my hand at improv. Before everybody disperses, though, I think now would be a good moment to try to get a group photo if you guys are willing. If you guys can hop on the stage here, and we'll try to just get some
hop on the
photos.
stage and don't talk too loud.
Yeah, try not to talk too loud as best as you can. It'll just get noisy fast.
Get a good position there so we can like sit on me. Oi, I don't want to cover smoke.
Yeah, I think so. All right, one moment, just getting it all.
I guess I have to.
Perfect. There's just. All right, almost got it all in. Get that angle. Almost, guys. Sorry, just VR is a perfect platform with absolutely no problems whatsoever. All right, everybody. If you see my photo, just
Fast forward. Almost set my full body on. Give me 1 second. Put your body on. 1 second. Put your body on. Sorry.
Family photos.
Perfect platform. Perfect platform.
Family photo.
I got my 3/4 body on.
These are great. These are great, y'alls. All right. I just always take 20. We've got it. You've done it all. You've done well.
Sick.
1 million.
Perfect.
1 million photos.
Awesome.